I want to share a few memories of Devesh from the days that I had in India and Nepal in 2018 when Sam decided he and his friends were cycling from Delhi to Kathmandu. Brian and I worked it out that I would first go to the network meetings, which was a delight seeing Devesh working at the level of his people and Gary, of course, leading. Devesh explaining some fairly complex things that Brian and Gary were presenting to them. This is Devesh with Mukund. They were in the same city, worked very closely together. She was there with him in the hospital, and we do need to uphold her in prayer. These are all the coordinators that were there, and Santa in the red shirt at the front is a friend to the girl who my nephew is waiting to marry. He went and served in a project that we later discovered is a part of the network in Bangalore. So small world, hey? So the boys arrive, 30-something, fit and healthy. And then there's Gary and I who are going to get with them that 1,000 kilometers. Gary leading the way in his cotton shirt as the boys wear their lycra. I'm not sure who wished for the other's clothes as the time went on. And so he led them the whole way to Kathmandu, except the last day. As you can see here, it was through the city on some fairly complex, not well-signed roads. And on every morning, he would have to leave earlier and earlier to keep ahead of them. I was occasionally allowed to cycle. Devesh was intent that I would not cycle in the cities. They were just too dangerous. But when I did cycle, he told me that every single car that passed me would look back and check it was actually a girl that was riding a bike. Gary carried his office with him. What you can't see is there's actually a desk on his front wheel as he was doing his fundraising. Sam directed us to the Taj Mahal. It was actually the first time that Devesh had ever been. So Gary rested and Devesh took us round. A most delightful few hours that we had together. Occasionally, in his very humble way, he would just say, "Will you just take a picture on that good camera of me here?" And so here he is in front of the Taj. I want you to notice his attire and then tell me which of us planned well enough to sit where the famous sit. Here we are at a river crossing. He had made sure we had chocolate bars. I think this was a chocolate stop. And we'd scooted down a nice hill very fast. Of course, when you come down, normally you have to go up again. If I remember correctly, this is the first time he'd sat on a bike. So we would find Gary at some point in the day, and Devesh was always checking on him, talking on the phone. "How are you, my brother? What do you need?" It was very interesting watching the interactions between the two of them. There's one day Gary and I cycled for many, many hours through the rural areas. He was teaching me, as Devesh did when I was in the van with Devesh, about India, the networks, the horrendous issue of girls and trafficking. And I think Devesh's heart and passion was for the girls of India, being the father of girls, and that possibly is one of our greatest losses. He did his best to urge these guys to get to Kathmandu safely. He wanted them back to their wives and children safely. With this crazy traffic and sometimes with their crazy behaviour, they just could not wait for even sometimes some very fast trucks. And then he would encourage his brother when we would find Gary, as you can see, in agony. Now, The day before this happened, this is a rest day, and Gary had 2 punctures. I didn't know that. I carried on cycling for hours and hours and hours until I had no water, I had no money, I had no language, nothing. In the end, I just waited by the side of the road, and eventually Devesh, he came in the van. He was so worried, and he told me I'd just ridden through tiger forest. So we shared some of the glories of India together and found some wild rhinos, which is very rare. Devesh loved it as much as we did. We're in Nepal. That all of that through the tigers was in Nepal, if I remember correctly. And now this is a place we stayed for the night before starting to climb these mountains right to the top. I'm proud to say I did this climb with them. This is one of our stops. You can see down the valley. And one of the stops, he would go ahead, get some tea brewing, which eventually the boys kind of began to accept, and he would find snacks. So here are the guys gritting up that mountain. We were riding alongside, and he would just call out to them all the time, come on, keep going, keep going. Until we had Kathmandu in sight, and from there it was pretty much downhill until we found the hotel that we were staying in. The boys, exhausted, were greeted by Carnet, and we shared those joyful moments together. In the absence of Gary, who finished just about dusk, he finished all 1,000 kilometers, not an inch cheated. So we thank the Lord